The call came on a Tuesday morning, just after I poured my first coffee. It was an unknown number with a rural area code I didn't recognize. I almost let it ring out. Nothing good ever comes from a stranger calling before 9 a.m., but something in me picked up anyway. "Is this Ethan?" a man asked. His voice was steady and official. "Yeah," I said. "Who is this?" "This is Sheriff Talbot, Redwood County. I'm sorry to contact you like this, son. We've recovered a woman's body in the state forest. Your sister. You're listed as her closest next of kin." I actually laughed. One short, confused breath. "You've got the wrong guy." A pause, then pages rustling. Her name was Sarah Moorcroft. My last name. I sat down a little too quickly. My coffee sloshed over the rim. "Okay, well, that's definitely not me," I said. "I don't have a sister. I've never had a sister." He paused for a moment. "Your mother was Angela Moorcroft, correct?" "Was," I said. "She died 3 years ago." "And your father?" "Alive, but he lives in Nevada now. We don't talk much." Talbot cleared his throat. "Well, sir, I understand this is difficult, but our office already ran a preliminary DNA test. The state lab sent the results 30 minutes ago. The deceased woman is a full biological sibling match, 99.99%. The room tilted. For a second, I thought the sheriff might have misread something, mixed up files, contaminated samples, or maybe there was a glitch in whatever software they used. "Look," I began, trying to keep any panic from my voice. "I'm an only child, always have been. My dad would have mentioned something like this, like a dead daughter. My mom—" I cut myself off. She wasn't here to clarify anything. "I understand," Talbot said, "but the state doesn't normally get these things wrong. I'm afraid we'll need you to come down and formally identify the next of kin." My brain snagged on the phrase like it was written in another language. Formally identify the next of kin. How was I supposed to identify someone I didn't even know existed? "Identify her how?" I asked quietly. "In person," he said. "When you see her yourself, we'll know more." His words stuck with me long after the call ended. When you see her yourself, we'll know more. The implication wasn't subtle. Whoever she was, whoever I apparently shared blood with, they thought I would recognize her. I drove 6 hours to Redwood County. It was a nowhere town that didn't even bother with a welcome sign. It was surrounded by forests, littered with gas stations, and a stretch of road that looked like they'd been forgotten by time and funding. The sheriff met me outside the building. He was an older guy, with a drooping mustache and a wrinkled face that looked like it had been whittled out of pine bark. He nodded and led me through a side entrance into the coroner's suite. I'd expected it to be like what you see on TV, with high-tech equipment and bright white tiles. But instead, I was greeted with a concrete floor, linoleum walls, and the smell of preserved meat and bleach that assaulted my nose. "She's in drawer 6, the coroner said quietly. A woman, mid-50s maybe. Her badge read Dr. Elkins. I followed her to the wall of refrigerated units. She glanced at me like she was waiting for me to give her a reason not to do this. I didn't. She pulled open the drawer. The moment I saw the body, my stomach turned cold. She was about 30, maybe 35, skin pale, lips drawn back, dark hair brittle and sunken around her jaw. There was something about her face that wasn't quite alien. If anything, it was worse than that. She looked like my mother. Close enough that I instinctively took a step back. Same nose, same curve of the cheekbones, same slightly off-center parting of her hair. But there was something wrong beneath the familiarity. Her frame was frail, like she'd gone years without proper food. Her ribs rose like piano keys beneath her skin, fingers bone-thin and curved, like they'd been clenched for too long. And her skin, greyish, waxy, was marred by little patches of what looked like hardened scarring around the nose and mouth. Elkins noticed me staring. Calcified scar tissue in the lungs, probably long-term exposure to mineral-heavy dust. Could be a fungal buildup. Honestly, we haven't seen anything like it outside of old mining accidents. She paused. Do you have any idea how this happened? I shook my head. I hadn't even known she existed a few days ago. Sorry, she said gently. Didn't mean to push. The sheriff stepped closer and handed me a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a small, water-damaged Polaroid. It looked like it had been clutched tight for years, creased, torn in one corner, yellowed at the edges. I turned it over. It was me. 5 years old, bowl cut, missing front teeth, standing in the grass somewhere with a toy plane in my hand. Next to me was a girl about my age, smiling, holding my hand like we'd done it 100 times. The background was a blur of summer, the corner of a house I barely recognized. I didn't remember taking that photo. I didn't remember her. But there we were, like siblings, like we belonged together. I told myself 100 times I was going to sell the house. After Mom died, I even had a realtor on standby, keys in a manila envelope, business card paperclip to the top. But I never followed through. Every time I tried, something in me locked up. My chest became heavy, and it was like I was abandoning my parents, my childhood, everything that used to feel solid. It wasn't logical. I knew she was gone. I knew the house couldn't hold on to them. Not really. But some part of me still believed that as long as I had the keys, as long as the furniture stayed where they left it, I hadn't lost everything. So when I got back from Redwood County, that's where I went. The house was still how I'd left it. Sheets over the furniture, a faint trace of Mom's perfume still lingered on the carpet. Every room carried a memory like wallpaper. But now, that wallpaper felt thinner, brittle, like if I peeled back the right corner, something else might be underneath. I started in the living room. Her storage tubs were still stacked behind the couch, labelled in neat cursive. Xmas, important papers, Ethan's school, and photos. That was the one I grabbed first. I sat cross-legged on the floor, the plastic tub between my knees, and flipped through album after album. Baby pictures, birthday parties, school photos, smiles and crayon drawings and Easter baskets. But somewhere around age 3, the timeline blurred. Photos were missing. Whole pages had been ripped out, slices of times gone without explanation. No photos between Halloween of 93 and the summer of 97. Just blank spots, torn stubs where glue once held something real. I checked 3 more albums. Same thing. Age 3 to 7. Erased. Gone. I had to wonder, had my mom done this? Was she trying to hide something? Or had it been Dad? I could almost hear his voice in my head, annoyed, impatient. Why dig up the past? Nothing good comes from that. The thing is, I wasn't digging. I was remembering. Or trying to. It was nearly midnight by the time I finished tearing through the boxes and albums. I didn't want to stay the night. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. It was still the same layout I grew up in, the same walls and corners, but without them there, it felt hollow. But I hadn't slept much since the morgue, and the highway back to the city was all curves and blind turns. I didn't want to risk it, not with the rain starting to spit and streak the windows. So I stayed. The air mattress I kept rolled in the trunk was still there, along with a sleeping bag and a half-dead flashlight. I inflated it in what used to be the den. Hardwood floor, high ceilings, and the dusty ghost of where the couch used to be. The smell in the house had turned damp, like wet cardboard and neglected drains. I had to wipe the floor down with a dish towel just to make room. The silence pressed in once I lay down. I left the hallway light on just in case. I don't know when I fell asleep. I just remember waking to a voice. It whispered my name, faintly, softly, almost playful, coming from somewhere down the hall. I froze for a moment, holding my breath to listen out, but there was only silence. I sat up, reached for my phone to check the time. It was 3 a.m. That was when I saw them. There were bare, muddy footprints tracking across the wood floor from the kitchen, leading from the back door. They were small, too small to be mine, too wide apart to be a child crawling. They ended at the edge of my air mattress, right at the corner where my head had been moments earlier, and there were no prints going back. I stood, slowly, not breathing, heart smashing my ribs, and backed into the kitchen. I flicked on the overhead light. The back door was locked, deadbolt in place, no windows broken, no wind, no creaking. I pulled out my phone and opened the app for the old security cameras. I'd installed them right after Mom passed. They were cheap, motion-sensitive ones, just enough to spook off any squatters or drifters. The house had sat vacant too long, and I didn't trust people not to take advantage. The feed from the backyard loaded first. At 2:50 a.m., the camera glitched for just a frame. Then the back door opened slowly. No one in sight. Then, something entered. Small, crouched low like an animal. Its outline shimmered like heat on pavement. And then the feed glitched again, static blooming across the screen. And the door was closed. Nothing else. I scrubbed back and forth, pausing at the exact frame where the thing stepped through. There was no shape to it, but there was a shadow, and the shadow reached out to touch the doorframe like it was routine. I turned, half expecting something to be standing in the room behind me. Empty. Except the footprints were dry now, crackling, like they'd been there for hours. I went still. The whisper came again, closer this time. You forgot me. I spent most of the morning sitting in the same chair I used to eat cereal in as a kid, staring out the window like I expected the trees to spell something out for me. When I finally dialed, I already knew what he'd say, but I needed to hear it. He picked up on the third ring. Yeah. Dad, I said. It's me. A pause. Is everything okay? No, I said. Not even close. I could already hear the defensiveness loading behind his silence. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. No nonsense. He sighed, heavy through the receiver. It's about your mother's house again. No, I said. It's about my sister. That word landed hard. I heard it hit him. Something shifted in the way he breathed, but his voice didn't break when he replied. You don't have a sister. There was a body found in Redwood County. A woman. I was listed as the closest next of kin. The state ran a DNA test. She was a 99.99% sibling match. That's not possible, he said instantly. Too quick. It's a mistake. They mix things up all the time. You know they don't, and you're dodging. I'm not dodging anything, he snapped. There was no sister. There was no other kid. If this is some scam or some prank, I don't want anything to do with it. I forced myself to stay calm. Then explain the photo, I said. The one she was holding. It's me, 5 years old, with her. And all the photo albums in the house of the same years ripped out, like someone wanted to erase her. Silence. Longer this time. Then, geez, you sound like your mother, he muttered, digging into things that don't matter. She was always like that, making stories out of shadows. He was unraveling. Dad, I said, just tell me the truth. I am telling you, he said, louder now. There was never a daughter, just you. That's it. You understand me? I opened my mouth, but the line went dead. He hung up. I stared at the phone in shock. Part of me hoped he would call back, but he didn't. I opened my laptop and started digging. The county clerk's website was a mess, but with the right filters and an address I'd memorized decades ago, I found what I was looking for. It was a public record dated 27 years ago, filed under Angela Moorcroft. Report type, missing person, minor. Name, redacted, juvenile protection. Relation, daughter. Age 5. Case status, closed, withdrawn by father, child safety accounted for. Signed, Richard Moorcroft. Time elapsed, 48 hours. She tried to report it. He made it disappear. Just like her. Around sunset, I heard a small, sharp tap from the back hallway. Then another. Then a third, closer, like someone drumming their fingernails along the wall while they walked. I froze and listened, but there was nothing. Then there was a whisper, so faint I wasn't sure if it was my imagination. Hey. Soft, curious, as if testing the air. I grabbed my keys and went straight to the front door, twisted the knob, but it didn't budge. I threw my shoulder into it. Nothing, not even a rattle. Cold crept up my back. I tried the back door, then the windows. I even hauled a dining chair and smashed it against the largest pane. The chair just bounced. The glass didn't even tremble. On the final impact, the room exhaled, a low, vibrating groan from the walls that felt disappointed. That's when the house went quiet, a sealed space quiet, like someone had wrapped the place in cotton. And then came the second whisper, closer. Don't leave yet. I backed into the living room, chest tight. The lights dimmed, and that's when everything started. More taps, faster, sharper, scratching racing along the walls in erratic loops, then pounding hard, like fists beating from the inside of the walls, trying to break out. The lights flickered with each strike. I stumbled backwards, and something cold wrapped around my ankle. I screamed and fell, kicking instinctively. Nothing there, but the imprint stayed, a perfect child-sized handprint, pale against my skin. I scrambled under the couch, panting, clutching my shirt. Then the ceiling above me began to weep. Water, thick drops falling hard enough to splatter against the floorboards. A metallic smell hit me instantly. I gagged. Through the dripping, I heard something else beneath the floor. Sobbing. A child's sobs, muffled but unmistakable, shaking the wooden planks beneath my feet. I didn't want to move, but the house forced me to feel it. Suddenly, the back door creaked open. It wasn't forced open by anything, just wide open, like it had been waiting for me to notice. I didn't think. I ran. The yard was still wet with rain, grass slick under my shoes as I cut toward the shed. It was pure instinct, some half-formed belief that if I got outside she couldn't follow, as if ghosts respected thresholds. Behind me, I swear I heard her footsteps match mine. I ran too, she whispered. The footsteps kept pace, so I changed tact and looked for somewhere to hide. I remembered my old spot, the place I'd go to when I was overwhelmed as a kid. The shed. I threw open the shed door and slammed it shut behind me, latched it, even though the wood was soft from water damage, like that would stop anything. Inside, the air was thick with rust and dust. Everything smelled old and sour. I tried to catch my breath, but she kept speaking. I hid too, she said. I thought it would keep me safe. Something in me recoiled. I was running on pure instinct, but according to her, I was doing everything as planned, following a route she had as a child. Outside, the footsteps returned, slow, deliberate, circling the shed. If I was being predictable, then I needed to throw things off. As a kid, the tool closet was my go-to spot, big enough that you could sit in there for hours and out of the way for anyone not looking too hard. It was the first place I'd run, so I made sure to dart past it. He was relentless. The game would stop if I asked, but this time he was determined to catch me. The footsteps paused at the door. I scanned the shed. There were crates along the wall, old, reinforced toolboxes. I moved toward them, desperate for something, anything that might buy me seconds. If I was still a kid, I'd fit in with ease, but it took me a few attempts to squeeze in. I slipped the lid over and held my breath. I thought I was being smart when I avoided the tool closet. We always used that spot when we were desperate. In total black, my heart raced. It felt like there was nothing I could do to avoid this predetermined path, forced into following her steps before her demise. He walked in, called my name. I didn't answer. The footsteps softened. I couldn't hear where she was. Then, bang. A strike rang out across the wood. I felt like my heart would stop from the shock, thinking it was her way of saying, "I got you." But then another bang sounded on the crate, then another. I didn't know what was happening until she carried on her tale. He said, "That's better," she murmured, and started sealing me in. The reality of what she was doing kicked in when I felt the tip of a poorly placed nail dig into my side. I screamed and threw my shoulder against the lid. It didn't move. I kicked, pushed. The crate wouldn't budge. No give, like the walls were holding me down. Not that I could get much perch with how cramped the crate was. "I begged," she whispered. "I told him I'd be good. I told him I'd be quiet. He didn't listen." The crate shifted, tilted, then lifted. I was moving, jolted across the shed floor, the world tilting. "He drove me far," she said. "I don't know how long." I couldn't scream anymore. My voice was gone. Tears blurred everything. Scraping from inside the crate. Something that wasn't me. Something with too many fingers. I felt the little space I had in the crate fill, impossibly, with something that felt like skin, ice cold against my face. And the voice that I'd only been hearing muffled from outside the crate spoke clearly from inside so that I could feel the cold breath on my nose. When I couldn't scream, I started dreaming, and when I dreamed, they heard me. It's hard to say how long I was in the crate. Time didn't pass normally in there. Seconds stretched, hours collapsed. I started counting breaths just to keep my mind from breaking, but I lost track somewhere around 500. The air went stale, my knees ached from being folded too long, sweat soaked through my shirt, and every few minutes something inside the wood would twitch or creak. not like old wood settling, but like it was breathing with me. "Please stop," I begged. The voice that came back wasn't sympathetic. "That's what I said too, before I was buried." Her voice croaked, speaking low an inch from my ear. The weight above me got heavier. I could hear the shifting of packed soil, the sound of roots pushing in through cracks. I started to cry, quietly, bitterly. And somewhere in the grief, the truth settled in. My sister was buried alive by her father, and no one had come for her. I had lived a normal life, birthday parties, road trips, and a decent college. She had died in a box, forgotten by everyone. And now, I was in her place. And the worst part, I couldn't even say she was wrong to put me here. That's what gutted me the most. "You didn't deserve this," I whispered. "None of it." The crate creaked. "You were just a kid. I should have known. I should have remembered." I paused, tried to swallow the lump in my throat. My chest was shaking. "But it wasn't me who did this to you. It was him." Silence, but I could feel her listening. "It should have been him inside this box, not you, not me." The darkness held its breath. "You want someone to suffer for what happened? Fine, so do I pleaded. I waited. A long silence passed. He's still alive?" The voice came from just above my head, clear. I hesitated. "Yes." Another silence. And then the weight started to lift. The pressure above me eased. Her presence dissipated from the crate. I could feel the top of the crate, which was bowing inward from the pressure easing. "Then I'll make you a promise," she said. "I'll let you live if you give me him." I paused. Even with everything I'd been through, some small part of me still clung to the idea that I was betraying my father. But then I remembered the missing child report, the photo albums, the sound of nails being driven in, and the silence that followed. "He's in Nevada," I said. "Desert Ridge, using the name Edward Fox. I'll even give you the address." The crate split open. Just opened. Cool night air hit my face like a slap. I gasped, crawling out into the damp grass under a sky I hadn't seen in what felt like days. No one was around, but I knew she'd heard me. When I pulled myself out, I expected to see the backyard. I didn't. I was in the woods, deep enough that the trees blocked most of the sky. Wet leaves clung to my shirt. My knees buckled as I stood, legs stiff and shaking from being curled up so long. For a minute, I just stood there, breathing. I was alive. I turned slowly, taking in my surroundings. That's when I saw the yellow police tape, fresh, still tied to the trunks. It sagged between two trees like a cautionary whisper. There was a shallow pit nearby, half filled with disturbed earth. This was it, where they found her. She hadn't taken me to some memory or symbolic grave. She'd brought me to the exact place her body had been unearthed. And somehow, she'd made the journey feel like a memory instead of miles. She'd retraced the path. It took me hours to hike back to the road, longer still to find someone willing to give me a ride into town. Every step I took, I thought about him, my father. Part of me hoped she was already there, that it was done, that the next time I checked the news, I'd see a report about a man found dead in his trailer in Nevada, cause unknown. But part of me didn't, because he was still my father, and even if he deserved it, I needed to understand. Why her? Why bury her? Why make me forget? I borrowed a phone from the gas station clerk. It took me 3 tries to dial the number. He answered on the second ring. His voice was groggy, probably drinking, maybe sleeping. I didn't care. Hello? I said nothing at first, not knowing what to say. Then, I simply decided to be blunt. She's coming. Silence. What the hell are you talking about? He snapped. Who is this? You know who this is. Another pause, a rustle of movement, like he was sitting up straighter. Look, you never had a sister. Drop this nonsense. Do you understand me? You're being manipulated. I could hear the panic under the anger now. You can tell her that yourself, I said, flat. She's on her way to you. The silence that followed didn't stretch. It snapped. Jeez, he whispered. It didn't stop. I didn't say anything. He started breathing heavier, not scared for himself, but scared of something bigger. Listen, I didn't kill her, he said. Not really. I tried to stop what she was becoming, what she was bringing through. He spoke like the dam had broken, like he'd been waiting to say this for years. She was born wrong, he said. Not deformed or something genetic, just off, like her eyes saw something the rest of us didn't. And when she talked in her sleep, the walls would sweat. Do you understand? Water, condensation, like something was breathing on the other side. At first I thought she was just disturbed, maybe even gifted. But the older she got, the worse it got. Birds stopped nesting near the house, mirrors warped around her. She stopped aging for almost a year. I felt the blood drain from my face. She told me things she had no way of knowing. She started to whisper names at night, names that weren't real, not in this world. They weren't even pronounceable. And one night, I checked the baby monitor and his voice broke. Something else was whispering back. I sat down on the curb outside the gas station. The world felt suddenly too big, like it was pressing in from all sides. My grandfather left journals, old country stuff. He always believed some people could act like doors, not possessed, just born open, not even on purpose. Sometimes something just slips through. She was one of them. A breach. I tried everything, prayers, locks, psych wards, but she kept getting worse. And then one day she just stopped. He paused. I could hear him swallow. She came to me, calm, smiling. She said, "It's ready." I couldn't risk it. Not the world, not you. So I dealt with it. And it worked. I felt hollow. Until I told her where you were, I whispered. He let out a sharp, shaking breath. "You don't understand," she said. "That thing needed closure, a story that ends. You gave it what it wanted. It doesn't end with me. I'm just the final ritual, the finishing nail. Before she begins, if I die, it's loose." There was a single crackle of static on the line, and then he said something I'll never forget. "It wore your sister like a mask, but it's not her anymore, and it's not done with you." Click. The line went dead. The trip home felt like a punishment. I walked for miles before I found a bus stop, then another hour before anything came. Transfers, delays, cold benches, paper coffee cups with film skimming the top. No phone, no way to check if it had happened yet, if he was still alive, if he had won. Each hour that passed pulled me in two directions. Part of me prayed it was over. Part of me prayed it hadn't started yet. When I finally reached the house, it was nearly 3 in the morning. The place looked the same, unassuming, quiet, like none of it had ever happened. I opened the door with shaking hands, stepped inside, and quickly closed it behind me, like I was afraid of what might follow. The silence hit me first. Weighted silence, like the kind in old churches and deep caves. I found my charger, plugged in my phone. The screen took longer than usual to wake. The battery icon pulsed red like a dying heart. I waited. When it powered on, I opened the call log. No new calls, no texts, no missed voicemails. Just blank space, and time stretching too long. I sat down on the couch, phone balancing in my palm like I might summon an answer. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to light up, waiting for a message that said, "I'm okay. I stopped it. Everything will be okay." But all I got was static pings, old notifications, junk from apps I never used, a weather warning from a county I wasn't in anymore. And in the stillness, I noticed something else. The air was damp. I touched the wall beside me. Wet. Not the usual humidity. Dripping. The same slow weep I remembered from the nursery, from the crate, from her. And in that awful, heart-sick moment, I realized I wasn't watching my phone for news anymore. I was watching it for the reflection, because the glass on the screen was the only place I could see the window behind me without looking directly. And something had started to whisper again. Soft, high, sweet almost, a lullaby in reverse, like something humming a song that hadn't been written yet. I turned the phone just slightly, angling the reflection toward the far wall. And there she was, just outside the window, smiling. Her face didn't move like a human's. Her skin looked brittle, like porcelain stretched too thin. Her mouth was smiling, but her eyes weren't. They were watching me. Not in a malicious way, not fully, just patient, like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. My brain clung to a hope because I made a deal, gave her what she wanted, thought I'd be free. But I also remembered what Dad said. When I die, it's loose. It's not her anymore, and it's not done with you. And now, it's my turn.
Midnight Fear Archive.
Urban legends usually start the same way. A whispered warning, a cautionary tale, a rule you're supposed to follow without ever asking why. Don't go into the woods at night. Don't look in the mirror and call a name. Don't stop for the crying baby on the side of the road. The Counting Man belongs to that category. It spreads in fragments, old message boards, lost blogs, anonymous confessions, enough to form a pattern, but never enough to give answers. The rule itself is simple. If you're walking alone and you hear footsteps behind you that match your own, and a voice begins to count, don't turn around. That's it. That's the warning. The voice always starts at 1, low, deliberate, almost conversational. Each night it continues, one number higher than before. 2, 3, 4. The timing is always the same. After dark, when you're alone, and the footsteps never break rhythm. There are 2 known outcomes. If you break the rules, if you turn around, it's over instantly. There are no accounts testifying that someone has done this, so it's safe to assume the worst. If you don't turn, the count goes on. Each night it climbs higher, step by step, pulling you toward the number 10. And that's the part no one can fully describe. No account ever survives past 10. Whatever happens when the counting man finishes counting, it doesn't leave anyone behind to explain it. What we're left with are fragments, posts on forgotten forums, transcripts from police reports, journal entries abandoned halfway through, all describing the same phenomenon, same footsteps, same voice. Taken together, they don't look like folklore. They look like case studies. One of the earliest online references to the Counting Man comes from 2009 on a now defunct college forum archived by the Wayback Machine. The user went by Deckard42, a sophomore, 19, posting in a humor thread about campus pranks. His first post was light-hearted. "Someone's messing with me. Walking home from the library last night, heard footsteps behind me. Thought it was a friend. Looked around, nobody there. Then, swear to God, heard 1, like someone whispered it in my ear. Funniest crap I've ever seen. Whoever's pulling this, you got me." Other users teased him, told him it was an echo or campus security playing games. The next night, he posted again. It happened again. Different street, different time, Steps right behind me, keeping pace. This time it said 2. Same voice, same tone. I'm not kidding. This isn't funny anymore. The replies grew sharper. People accused them of trolling, of building an ARG, but the patterns continued. Each post a new number. 3, outside my dorm window this time. I didn't even leave the building. 4, I tried blasting music on my headphones, still heard it, louder. 5, I tried hiding, didn't help. The thread is long, over 60 replies, most of them mocking, but a few start to show concern as his tone shifts from joking to frantic. By 7, his posts are shorter, almost clipped. I'm not sleeping. Every time it comes, there's one more. It waits until I'm alone. Please tell me someone else has heard this. No one had, or at least no one admitted to it. His last entry, dated October 14th, 2009, reads, 9, right outside my door this time. I don't think I can keep this up. And that's where it ends. The account went silent, his email went dark. A roommate later posted that Deckard 42 had dropped out suddenly and left campus, though no records of a transfer exist. It's worth noting, the IP logs from his account show he made the last post from inside his dorm room, not on the street, not walking home. Inside, alone at his desk, which suggests the counting man doesn't need you outside in the dark to follow you. Once he starts counting, it goes wherever you go. Cases like Deckard 42's are usually written off as the product of stress. College kids pulling all-nighters, walking home tired. The mind can play tricks when it's short on sleep. Some psychologists argue it's a form of auditory pareidolia, the brain's tendency to find patterns where none exist. The footsteps you think you hear, the whispered one that isn't really there. But there's a problem with that explanation. The posts don't exist in isolation. Dig deep enough and you'll find fragments of the same story scattered across obscure forums and forgotten threads. A Usenet post from the late 90s mentioning the man who counts, a survivalist board warning not to let it get to 10. A chain email from the early 2000s describing footsteps that match perfectly night after night. The details line up too neatly to be dismissed as coincidence. Always the same pattern. Footsteps in sync, a man's voice counting, one number per night. The rule, don't turn around. And silence after 10. Folklore doesn't usually cross mediums this way. It doesn't survive from email forwards to Reddit threads to Discord servers unless there's something feeding it. And that's where the unease comes in. Because if these stories aren't random, if they're connected, then it means the counting man isn't just a legend. It's a phenomenon. The following detailed account dated 2016, buried in a series of scanned notebook pages uploaded to an image board. The files were titled simply, Commuter Journal. The handwriting belongs to a woman in her mid-30s, judging by the context, who describes herself as a night shift worker taking buses home after midnight. The first entry picks up at 5. It's been going for almost a week now, always when I leave work and when I walk to the bus stop. Footsteps behind me, perfectly timed, the voice counting. Last night was 4, tonight was 5. I don't know what happens when it reaches 10, but I'm starting to believe the people online. She admits to trying to test the rules, putting in earbuds, taking different routes, pausing to see if the steps would pause too. They always did. By 7, her tone shifts. It's getting closer. I feel breath on my neck, but I won't turn. I can't. I tried to use the bus window as a mirror, just to check. Thought maybe if I looked that way, it wouldn't count as turning around. I don't know if it was a mistake. I saw my reflection mouthing the number 7. My lips weren't moving. The next entries are increasingly frantic. She describes covering mirrors in her apartment, refusing to glance at the black surface of her phone when it's off. But reflections aren't the problem. The footsteps never stop. Her last entry is dated February 3rd, 2016. By 9, the pages are shaky, smudged. It's with me everywhere, not just on the street anymore, in the break room, in the stairwell, in the bus aisle. I hear it even when there's no room for anyone to be walking behind me. Nobody reacts, no one else hears it. I'm not safe anywhere. The scans end there. A curious detail. Users on the forum cross-referenced the bus route times against the city's open transit records. She stopped tagging into the system after that date. No last trip, no exit scan, no ride logged under a card again. She didn't just vanish from the bus. She vanished on it. Which raises a disturbing question. If turning around means you die, and reaching 10 means you disappear, which fate is worse? It's easy to think the counting man might be tied to a city block or state, a place he could avoid, but the accounts don't agree with that. Reports come from everywhere. Quiet suburbs, isolated country highways. It isn't the location that matters. It's the person. Once the counting starts, it follows you. Across neighborhoods, across state lines, even across oceans, if some of the scattered forum posts are to be believed. The common thread isn't where people hear it, it's that they all describe the same rules, the same footsteps, the same voice. That suggests the counting man isn't a haunting or a cursed road or even a local legend. It's a phenomenon, portable, persistent, personal. And if it attaches to a person instead of a place, then running may not save you. Among the scattered accounts, one of the most cited is a Reddit thread from 2014. The user went by ground level. He described the first few nights much like everyone else. The footsteps, the voice, the steady climb of numbers. By 4, he admitted he was already panicking. But unlike most cases, he tried something different. I ran, full sprint. No rhythm, just chaos. The footsteps behind me stumbled. The voice stopped. And when it came back the next night, it was back to 1. I think I broke it. His post drew immediate attention. Dozens of commenters asked for details. Was it a trick, a glitch in whatever this thing was? Could you reset the sequence just by running? For a while, his updates gave people hope. Second night after running, it worked, back to 1. If I keep this up, maybe I could hold it off forever. But a week later, the tone shifted. It's different now. Even though it reset to 1, it doesn't sound the same. Louder, closer. I feel it breathing harder. And the steps don't stumble when I run anymore. They keep pace. By the next reset, the escalation was apparent. The voice grew increasingly distorted, deepening with each passing moment. The footsteps struck harder, like boots on concrete, even when he was indoors. His final reset brought him back to 1 again, but with a consequence he hadn't expected. It's behind me all the time now, not just at night. Grocery store, elevator, bathroom. I don't know how much longer I can handle this. Other users begged him to stop running, to just let it play out rather than making it worse. But his posts kept coming, shorter, more frantic. Louder than before, walls shake, my ears are bleeding. I can't reset it this time. His account went silent immediately after. A cross-check of his profile shows he'd been an active user for years. After that final post, nothing. No comments, no logins, no activity at all. What stands out about his case is the pattern. The reset didn't save him. It only made things worse. The numbers always start over, but the intensity doesn't. It builds layer on layer. And that suggests the counting man isn't just tallying nights, he's tallying you. Which leaves the question, is it better to let the count finish, or to run and make what comes after even worse? It's tempting to think of the counting man as a digital age creation, a creepypasta that spread across forums and message boards, dressed up with the same ritualistic rules we've seen in hundreds of other urban legends. But the pattern didn't start online. The earliest traceable reference appears in an Ohio newspaper from 1891. The article is grainy, barely legible, preserved only through a university microfilm scan. It reports on a farmer's family outside Chillicothe who complained of phantom footsteps circling their porch every night for 9 days. Neighbors dismissed it as coyotes or trespassers. On the 10th night, the family vanished. The sheriff's deputy who arrived the next morning found the dinner table still set, plates half eaten, bread torn mid-bite. No signs of struggle, just silence and empty chairs. Go back further, and the fragments grow stranger. In a sailor's diary from 1743, recovered from a wreck in the North Sea, one entry stands out. On the 7th night, he spoke 7, that no man was behind me. I must not turn, the crew begs me. They do not hear it as I do. The diary ends there. The next pages are ruined by seawater. No mention of storms, mutiny or shipwreck. Just an abrupt stop, as if the account itself had no chance to continue. Other records exist in scattered folklore collections, including a Bavarian folklore about the Seele, the counter who walks behind men on empty roads, and a letter from a missionary in the 1600s describing an invisible step-matcher that tormented converts at night. Are these hoaxes? Folklore bent to fit a modern internet story? Maybe. Historical anomalies are prone to misinterpretation, especially when a pattern has already been suggested. But the consistency is hard to ignore. The details don't shift the way most legends do. The same progression appears again and again. Footsteps in sync, a man's voice rising one each night, the climb toward 10. Different cultures, different languages, different centuries, the same rules. These records can't be verified, of course. We can't know if the farmer's family simply fled or if the sailor's diary was fabricated. The similarities are too precise to dismiss as coincidence. The counting man didn't begin with the internet. He didn't begin with stories whispered on message boards or shared through chain emails. The implication is darker. The counting man predates the internet, predates cities, predates memory itself. He has always been behind us. Suppose the historical record shows the counting man isn't confined to the internet age. In that case, modern reports prove something stranger still. He isn't confined to any one region. Threads from Brazil describe o homem que conta, always in Portuguese, always the same phrasing. Footsteps, a man's voice, the steady rise toward 10. A Japanese forum in 2007 called him Kozairu Otoko, the counting man, with the same warning not to turn around. South African blogs mentioned Umuntu Okubala, and posts from Eastern Europe repeat the same detail. One number each night whispered at your back. Different languages, different continents, the same ritual unchanged. That isn't how folklore usually works. As a rule, urban legends mutate when they travel. The hitchhiker ghost is American. In Japan, she becomes the slit-mouthed woman. In Mexico, she is known as La Llorona. The details shift, molded by culture and language. Endings change, villains take on local masks, rules bend. That's what keeps folklore alive. It adapts. The counting man doesn't. Everywhere he appears, the pattern remains the same. No local embellishments, no regional variations, just the same rules repeated with unnerving precision. Footsteps that match your own, a voice counting one number per night. Don't turn, don't reach 10. The consistency suggests the phenomenon isn't cultural at all. It doesn't spread like rumor or myth. It doesn't evolve. It replicates exactly. Which leaves us with two unsettling possibilities. Either every culture spontaneously invented the same story with the same rules, the same outcome, which is almost impossible, or the counting man isn't a story at all. He's a constant, something real enough to appear the same way to anyone, anywhere, regardless of language or culture. And if that's true, there's one more question worth asking. Why is the pattern surfacing more frequently now? There's one final pattern worth mentioning, though it's easy to miss if you're only reading individual accounts. In nearly every case, the victim heard about the counting man before they heard the footsteps. The college student in 2009 admitted he'd read a stupid email about a man who counts before his first encounter. The commuter's journal included a line, "I thought this was just another internet ghost story. Then I started hearing it myself." Even the so-called survivor who tried to reset the rhythm wrote in one of his earliest posts. Maybe I shouldn't have read that thread. Maybe that's what started it. And this detail isn't unique to the internet era. The Ohio farmer's family in 1891. The newspaper clipping notes that neighbors had been joking about a local phantom counter before the footsteps began. The sailor's diary from 1743 refers to a tale told by Doc Hans the night before he first recorded the voice. It happens again and again. Awareness comes first, then the footsteps, then the count. That suggests the counting man doesn't hunt randomly. He doesn't linger on roadsides waiting for strangers. He comes when you know the rules. In other words, knowledge itself is the trigger. That would explain the consistency across centuries and cultures. The story doesn't mutate because it doesn't need to. Every version is the same because it isn't folklore spreading. It's contagion. Each account isn't a warning, it's an infection vector. The more detail you read, the more precise the rules become in your head, the closer you are to hearing that first step fall in sync with your own, which reframes everything we've looked at. The vanished accounts, the broken journals, the posts that stop mid-sentence. Maybe they didn't end because the victims disappeared. Perhaps they ended because by writing them down and passing on the rules, they were ensuring the cycle would continue in someone else. And perhaps that's why the stories always stop before 10. Not because they have nothing left to say, but because by the time you know enough to ask what happens next, the footsteps have already begun behind you.
Midnight's fear.